Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
It is Election Day, and many of you who listen to the show via podcast, maybe you heard this as bonus content Monday night. I just kind of wanted, A, to get a jump on Tuesday morning because it's going to be a busy day. But B, I didn't want to end my podcast without continuing to harp on the misinformation, the disinformation, the outright lying that susceptible MAGA Republicans have been duped by for so long. I'm just going to continue the narrative. When are they going to get mad at the people doing the lying to them, the folks that are doing the misrepresenting? I don't know that it'll ever happen. They've been lied to since the advent of talk radio and the end of the fairness doctrine. They've been lied to since the advent of Fox News. They've been lied to since Frank Luntz and Newt Gingrich and Rush Limbaugh all came to a head in the 90s and learned how to wordsmith and to figure out how easy it is to dupe folks who are on their marionette strings, MAGA marionette strings, unfortunately. Listen, I've lived in the South all my life. I've been surrounded by conservatives. I have family members who are easily duped conservatives. It is what it is. And I know how hard it is to have conversations with these folks. They just shut down. They don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Okay. But you have to continue trying, right? You have to continue reasoning. I'd like to think that if my mother were still alive today, and by the way, her birthday was on the 1st of November. Love you, Mom. Miss you so much. That she was one of those folks that I could have those conversations with. My grandmother, her mother, who was a hardcore, rock-ribbed Reagan Republican, loved Bernie Sanders. Really wanted Bernie to win the Democratic nomination in 2016. Of course, that didn't happen, but my grandmother was going to vote for Bernie Sanders. There are folks who can be conversed to, who can be reasoned with, who you can point to the fact that they've been lied to for so long before they finally realize that light bulb comes on and they go, well, son of a bitch, these motherfuckers have been lying to me all this time. Yes, get mad at the right people, and then get active. I ended the Monday show, if you're listening on American One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, with just a tiny hint of what Bill Maher led off with his new rule from last Friday night's show. And I'm going to give you that new rule in its entirety. It speaks to the economy and how the MAGA voter believes the economy is in tatters and just utterly in disarray. And I mean, you hear them talk. I mean, the Trump ads are like the upside down world. They tell you that, you know, left is right, that water is dry, that the sun is cool. And it's like nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, could the economy be better? I mean, sure, I suppose it could be. And actually, there's still a lot of inequality to deal with. But it's the right that fights the inequality, to keep the inequality in place. Again, Bernie Sanders never became the Democratic Party nominee. He would love to fight inequality. We'd love to see the minimum wage reflect modern inflationary measures. We would love to see, DEI initiatives that make sure that a woman gets paid comparable to her male counterpoint, that a black woman is able to bridge not only the gender gap, but the racial gap as well when it comes to equity in pay. Never mind opportunity, just the opportunity to be able to achieve by starting at the same starting line without obstacles in the way, the obstacles that the non-marginalized never sees before them, so they don't think they exist in other folks' lanes. I have this guy on Facebook. I don't even know how we know each other. I think we just have common former coworkers in the radio business. His name is Greg. Greg posted this, I think it's a meme, I guess, from October 21st, where this guy named Dan wrote in the big bold letters on Facebook, "I trust my grocery bill to tell me the truth about the economy, not the media," with 3 exclamation points. Here's the thing. There's actually a metric for that. The hours of work needed to purchase a week's worth of groceries. That's an actual metric. Happy to, and I guess I can put this in the show notes. It's the photos that are a hard thing. I'll put it in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. The hours of work needed to purchase a week's worth of groceries, by the way, is back at 2019 levels. That's right, back at 2019 levels. The best numbers that Donald Trump posted when it comes to the metric, hours of work needed to purchase a week's worth of groceries, the non-COVID numbers anyway, we're at the same numbers we're at today. And I don't like to be mean to people about this, but I will not hesitate to say that obviously that's factoring inflation. But wage growth has also occurred in the last 4 years. So if the grocery bill has taken a bigger bite out of your budget than it did in 2019, well, you're just not making as much. And whose fault is that? Who's ultimately responsible for how much you're making? It's not Joe Biden. It's not Kamala Harris. Because the metric, hours of work needed to purchase a week's worth of groceries, says the trip to the grocery store shouldn't be impacting you any worse than it did in 2019. Sorry. But what about gas prices? There's a metric for that too. Minutes of labor per gallon. The minutes of labor per gallon is back, well, here it is again, at 2019 levels. And that's even with the Russia-Ukraine war going on. I will give you that as well from econbrowser.com in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. So gas isn't, factoring for inflation, any more expensive for you than it was in 2019. So you can't complain about that anymore either, right? So at what point in time, again, do folks who are misled start to realize they're being misled about even the economy? Stupid. Well, Bill Maher, with his final new rule on Friday night's Real Time with Bill Maher, leapt right into that.
And finally, new rule. Well, here we are, the Friday before Election Day, and at least one of my predictions was right on the money. It's tied, as it always is. That's just who this country is now. Two tribes, united by a history, but maybe not a future. I'm sticking with my other prediction that Harris is going to win, but I can't say I'm not nervous that the election is in the hands of a small cohort of undecided voters, those curious few bisexuals of the political world. Oh, everybody loves to mock, but I see it as more of a personality thing. I call them the Christmas Eve shoppers of politics. They know the big day is coming, but they just can't get themselves to do anything about it until the last minute. So let me have a word with them. Hi, Christmas Eve voter. Look, you obviously don't like Trump, or you'd be in that camp already, but you're still torn. And I'm the guy who keeps saying, I get why. You wanted more reassurance that the Democrat isn't going to go along with every aggressively anti-common sense idea that comes out of the woke mind virus, which, yes, is a thing. And if she loses, that will be mainly why.
I kind of think Bill's kind of lost his way a little bit when it comes to this sort of thought. But anyway, I think the anti-trans attacks on the Harris campaign have had their effect. I've said as much.
And part of that mind virus is progressivephobia, Steven Pinker's term for the liberal fear of ever admitting when things are actually good. As The Economist puts it about America today, an economy with an unemployment rate of 4% and a per-person GDP of $85,000 does not have to be made great again. It is great.
Exactly that. And that's on Democrats for messaging too, I guess.
And yet, the economy is the Christmas Eve voters' other big issue, and they think it's terrible, when actually it's bigger and better than ever. Makes Arnold Palmer's dick look like nothing.
Thank God.
When we were coming out of the pandemic, every economist predicted we were headed for a recession and all the horrible things that come with it. But much like Trump's girlfriends, those things never came. The truth about America today, what Democrats should have been selling is everything that should be low and down is. Unemployment, low. Black unemployment, low. Poverty rate, low. Gas prices, down. And everything that should be up and high is.
Wages.
Manufacturing, real wages, The stock market, personal spending, personal savings, oil production. The U.S. now produces more energy than it uses.
I believe the term for that is energy independence.
Mississippi is America's poorest state, but its residents earn on average more than Canada, Germany, or England. If Trump was president with this economy, it would be 24/7 of we have the greatest economy ever in the history of the world, maybe the universe. Many people are saying it. But Trump isn't president now, so you get this.
Now you have millions and millions of dead people, and you have people dying financially because they can't buy bacon, they can't buy food, they can't buy groceries.
That's right. In this reality, if you don't get bacon, you'll die. Which is also what my dog thinks. But here on Earth One, it's not actually like that. The vast majority of Americans make it to the Piggly Wiggly and back alive. Yes, everything at the dollar store costs $1.50 now, but Biden didn't invent food costs money. And what caused the inflation was shutting the entire country down and paying everyone $6 trillion to stay home because a bad flu was going around. And Trump and Biden both did that. Everybody took the money, and I don't see anyone in this crowd handing back the checks. But who brought inflation down further and faster than any other country? The United States, bitches. It peaked here in 2022 and since has dropped like a rock to 2.4%. Biden tamed it without causing a recession, which is like catching a SpaceX rocket with your butt cheeks. The phrase I hear so much that makes me just want to unalive myself is, how's she going to help me? Like the president is your personal genie.
That's right, Greg. I told you. Grocery prices, yes, higher, but your wages should have kept pace. And if they didn't, that's not on Kamala or Joe. That's on you and or your boss, who you should talk to about that.
And it's a government, not an insurance company. I don't know if Kamala worked at McDonald's, but she's not Flo from Progressive. You think you're living in the Second Great Depression because you can't buy a full foot of sandwich for $5? Maybe you're not looking at the actual numbers. Maybe your hat's too tight. And undecideds, you should be voting Harris because of the economy. But undecideds don't get that message.
Firstly, because they don't listen to the Ron Show, because I've been saying this shit for a while.
Because Democrats can't make the words, "things aren't so bad," ever come out of their mouths, lest someone somewhere accuse them of not caring enough about people who are struggling. But even in a good economy, some segment of society will always struggle with money.
But I also think that the effects of the 2016 cycle are why Democrats are shy about saying things aren't so bad now. Because things were actually pretty good in 2016 as well, but a lot of folks were still kind of dealing with the fact that, again, wages hadn't kept pace, the minimum wage had lost pace, and they didn't want to hear that things are actually pretty good when the working class, the lower income working class in particular, still had battles to be fought on their behalf, and Democrats really weren't saying in 2016, there's more work to be done. And I'll say that's something that I think that the Harris presidential campaign has done pretty well. They've acknowledged that prices had gotten out of control, and they're looking to do things to keep that from happening again. You know, attacking price gouging at the federal level. Great idea. Why haven't we done this before? The corporatization of our society, our economy, makes it harder for competition to drive prices down because we let corporatization happen. We let deregulation happen. And so we only have Kroger, Albertsons, Publix, and Amazon and Walmart. That's really about it anymore. We don't have regional grocery chains like we used to. We don't have competitive grocery chains like we used to bring those prices down by saying, us as consumers, well, if it's too high here, I'm going there. All right, back to Bill wooing the undecided voter, the Christmas Eve voter, he calls them.
Dear Christmas Eve voter, I say to you, things aren't that bad, but they might get a hell of a lot worse under the rule of a mad king. Do I love everything about Kamala?
Obviously not.
No. Who told you you get to love everything? Do I wish she came up with a better reason to be president than I'm not Trump? Yeah, it would have been very helpful. But let's not forget, I'm not Trump is still a really great reason.
And as Bill mentioned, there is a track record she can run on where she worked at the left hand of a president who guided us out of a pandemic, avoided a recession, found the soft landing that the Fed was looking for. So home prices or the cost of borrowing money to buy a home, they're going to come down. She's looking to work with that as well with her first-time home buyer incentive. Inflation is back at pre-pandemic levels again. And if that's not good enough, look at her opponent who wants to put a tariff on all imported goods. That's going to come out of your pocketbook. Look at the mass deportation plan he has in place. Elon Musk literally confessed, and we're going to take a break and come back and talk about this Tuesday on the Ron Show. Elon Musk literally confessed that Trump's mass deportation plan is going to cause a cratering of the economy. Believe that man when he says this, because for once, he's telling the truth. You're listening to The Ron Show on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. So later in the show, we'll reach out and talk with frequent guest of the show. In fact, the very first guest of The Ron Show more than 2 years ago, Georgia Windlass Executive Director Melita Easters. Jeff Graham with Georgia Equality will be checking in as well. I want to follow up on a story that has been bubbling under the surface here in the state of Georgia that could affect about 3,000 voters in metropolitan Atlanta's Cobb County.
Just hours ago, the Georgia Supreme Court reversed a deadline extension for thousands of absentee voters in Cobb County. And the reversal comes just days after a lower court judge granted the extension because of 3,000 absentee ballots delayed in the mail.
11 Alive's Angelina Salcido joining us live tonight from the Cobb County election headquarters. And Angelina, you say the new ruling is causing some confusion tonight.
Especially for these voters that are just now hearing about this news. I'm told by election officials here in Cobb County that about 60% of registered voters in this county have already cast their ballot, and most of the absentee ballots that they sent out have already been returned, but some may linger behind. Hours before Election Day,
I got my reminder this morning that I needed to take care of that for her today.
Cobb County voters rushed to the polls to get their absentee ballots in.
I have a college sophomore who came home to vote this weekend and to drop off her absentee ballot for her.
Lisa Harris making sure her 19-year-old's first time voting goes smooth.
We'd actually been looking forward to come to the house, but it actually ended up at her school. And so just the confusion with that, I feel that it would have been fair to give people a little more time.
But after the Supreme Court's ruling Monday afternoon,
ballots do need to be in to the elections headquarters here on Roswell Street by 7 o'clock on election night.
Cobb Elections fought to get an extension through the end of the week for nearly 3,400 absentee ballots sent out late, but it got struck down.
It was clearly violating Georgia law.
Josh McCoon, the chairman of Georgia's Republican Party that fought for Monday's ruling.
We were simply standing for the law that's been in place for many years, that absentee ballots only get counted if they're returned by 7 p.m. on Election Day.
While some voters might be concerned about getting their vote in,
I think it's kind of unfair.
Officials ask anyone having trouble to vote in person on Election Day.
And vote in person, and that will count. And we're encouraging them to do so.
I'm being told by election officials that if you do choose to vote in person tomorrow and requested an absentee ballot, that in-person vote should cancel out that absentee ballot request, and you should not have any issues.
Okay, so Angelina, what happens if ballots are received after the 7 p.m. deadline tomorrow?
Well, those ballots are still being accepted until Friday at 7 p.m. I'm told by election officials that they're going to be stored in a secure place, and hopefully those ballots will be able to be counted. But still, they're stressing that the best chance for you to be able to cast your vote is going to be tomorrow, or to hand in your absentee ballot by 7 p.m. right here at the elections office. We're live in Marietta. Angelina Salcido, 11 Alive News.
So yeah, that's from WXIA TV. Very confusing, honestly, when she tells you that county election officials tell you that they'd like to think that any late returning absentee ballots that were postmarked by today's date would be counted, but in fact, they would be set aside. In fact, the Georgia State Supreme Court is telling Cobb elections officials, set that aside in case there is legal action later on down the road that determines that we may need to actually count those what would be provisional ballots after the fact. Catherine Landergan at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting here. In fact, she's got a great example here. Will Spillman, who is a Cobb County resident attending law school in Washington, D.C., said he was one of the absentee voters who received his ballot late. He received an email from the county confirming it had overnighted his ballot on October 29th, but he says he didn't receive it until Monday, yesterday, 11 a.m. Now he's worried his vote may not arrive on time. It definitely is confusing. I hope it gets counted, he said, considering the fact that the overnight sending of my ballot took multiple days. Yes, I'm pretty concerned. The delay in getting the ballot was actually a county mistake, not an absentee voter requesting the ballot waiting until the last minute either. That's something that seems to get muddied by Josh McCoon and the Georgia GOP. But of course, misinformation, disinformation. We've been talking about this for 2 days now. That's the hallmark of the modern conservative movement. I honestly don't understand what the big deal is. This was a county mistake. Folks are postmarking by today. We don't certify until next Monday. I'm trying to understand what the Georgia Supreme Court's doing here. Back after this, The Ron Show on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn.
Follow The Ron Show on Facebook at The Ron Show Radio. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Georgia Windlet's Executive Director, Melita Easter's joining us on The Ron Show. And you guys have a slate of candidates that could potentially tip the balance of power in the Georgia House of Representatives. Good morning. Thank you for joining The Ron Show. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to have 77 Windlist endorsed women who are running across 81 of Georgia's 159 counties on the ballot. It's a very exciting day for us.
Yeah. We were just talking minutes ago about the Georgia State Supreme Court's decision to disallow a late return of more than 3,000 absentee ballots. We know that Georgia's northern suburbs could be the tipping point at the presidential election, but there are also candidates, again, down ballot, who may be affected by curious decisions like this. It'll be interesting to see what happens and how close the margins are in some of these races, and of course at the top of the ticket as well. Your initial thoughts on the Georgia Supreme Court deciding that those late returning absentee ballots, again, through no fault of the requester of the ballot, but from the county board itself, your initial reaction to that?
Well, I just think it's really sad to see as many as 3,000 voters, 1,000 of whom are out of state and requested the ballots to be mailed out of state, potentially disenfranchised through the lack of staffing or whatever excuse they're going to use at the Cobb County Board of Elections. And I hate to see the courts endorse the inaction and the bad performance of that elections board by endorsing the disenfranchisement of those voters. I hope there's a judicial remedy, perhaps at a federal district court level.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if they're postmarked and they're in by Friday, we don't certify till Monday. I don't get it.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. I have a friend who, in the Warnock runoff, was living in England, literally hand carried her ballot to the American embassy, put it in the box, took a photograph a full week ahead of the deadline, and it still didn't get counted. And she was very upset to not have her vote count. So it's important to people to feel that their voice is heard, and to have the court endorse not hearing those voices is really sad.
Let's get back to your slate of candidates. Obviously, early voting has seen swells of numbers, and among those numbers, women seem to really show up.
Well, women have more at stake.
Okay.
Because in a state like Georgia, where there is no referendum on the reproductive freedom issue and allowing women the autonomy to make their own medical decisions about reproductive health care. And we have to remember that abortion is not just an unwanted pregnancy. It is often the remedy for pregnancy complications. And it's life-saving treatment. And more we're hearing about not just the women who died, but the women who are left untreated until they're almost at the point of death before they can get the necessary medical care. So women are not willing to see their daughters and granddaughters put at the risk of these abortion bans. Women don't want to see, especially grandmothers like myself, don't want to see our granddaughters in a world where they have less rights for medical autonomy than we did. The Lukovich cartoon over the weekend, where the handmaidens are going into the voting booth and coming out in street clothes, was such a powerful message. And that is the heart of what motivates women to vote.
And the numbers bear that out. When you look at just early voting numbers in the state of Georgia, women outpaced men amongst first-time and or non-voters from 2020 by more than 80,000, by more than 400, or by nearly 400,000 overall amongst all early voters. And we're not going to sit here and pretend that all the women that showed up to vote early are Democrats or even left of center. There may be amongst those women who voted, who may be conservative or Republican, who still have the Dobbs decision on their mind, wouldn't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, there are a lot of women who will vote for protecting reproductive freedom without telling husbands, without telling pollsters, and sometimes without even telling their friends. And so I think the polls have been skewed on this issue. And I think we're going to see some surprising results.
We've seen a lot of press coverage about the Texas abortion law and the casualties from that law, but we're also starting to hear more stories from other states, Georgia among them, obviously. In fact, there was a story in the USA Today not all that long ago that spoke of a 34-year-old woman here in Atlanta who nearly lost her life as well. And we obviously, do actually have evidence of a woman losing her life here in the state of Georgia because of negligent care due to inaction and trepidation from her physicians.
Yes, it's a tragic situation. And the USA Today article, I really commend the woman who was courageous enough to share her very personal story. She had a PhD in genetics from the Harvard Medical School. And so she was able to be a very proactive advocate for her own treatment in a way that many less educated women might not be.
And that's no slam. I mean, she's a
no,
very
that's not a slam.
Yeah, she's a very educated woman. It's just there aren't very many people, period, who are that educated.
Well, and it shouldn't require a PhD to be your own best advocate.
Right.
You trust the doctor.
Right.
But the doctors are now forced to call the hospital attorneys or their personal attorneys about what they can do and when they can do it. And that is the tragedy of these abortion bans that women are so upset about. And frankly, when that 6-week ban was passed in 2019, doctor after doctor, midwife after midwife, lawyer after lawyer begged the Republicans on those committees, please define the life of the mother in a way that gives doctors more flexibility to practice the medicine they've been taught. And because the Republicans didn't believe the law would ever actually go into effect, because at the time Roe v. Wade was still in effect nationwide, they didn't bother to take the time to correct the law. And that legislative negligence is why women have already died in Georgia, why women's health is put at risk in Georgia, and why women are turning out to vote in record-setting numbers, like the old Helen Reddy song says, in numbers you can't ignore.
Melita Easter's executive director of the Georgia Win List joining us. So, prospects of overtaking the state legislature, not rosy. It's a numbers game, and we were talking with Andrew Heaton yesterday, Democratic strategist, and he's hopeful we can get within maybe 6 to 8 seats of at least tying the Georgia House, the Georgia General Assembly House chamber. What are your thoughts on that? Again, I know you have a slate of 77 women running for various seats throughout the state of Georgia. Many of them running for Georgia House seats. Getting that close, is there the potential to at least find some modicum of bipartisanship to develop legislation to address some of
Absolutely.
these issues that you're speaking about now?
Absolutely. You have to remember that House Bill 481, when it passed in 2019, it passed by only one vote more than the majority needed.
Mm-hmm.
Even though back then the House had a wider margin of Republican control. Win-list endorsed women have flipped 3 House seats since 2019. The other thing that's happened since 2019 is that more than 1/3 of the House and more than 1/3 of the Senate seats have changed hands. Not necessarily changed parties, obviously, but changed hands. So the legislature, even before the votes are cast today, is a very different legislature than when that abortion ban was passed in 2019. And what you have to do is get close enough to a more even distribution between the two parties that some of the moderate Republicans can walk on a vote of a future legislation. And the thing is, all of the women who are running, and it is predominantly women who are running in the flippable suburban Georgia or Macon or Augusta seats, those women some of them have to win, obviously, to help improve the Democratic standing in the General Assembly. But the others who move that needle closer to a defeat on this issue will make those Republicans who remain standing far more wary of ignoring the sentiments of the 70% of Georgia voters who oppose abortion bans. So even the women who don't win tonight, women win because they were in the race, because it makes Republicans more aware of what those women think and how they will continue to vote in the future.
So if you'll do me a favor and speak to the voter that thinks there's no way that they can flip the House, there's no way they can flip the Senate, so introducing legislation to address some of the inadequacies of the heartbeat bill, our prospects are slim. Can there be enough pressure in the Georgia General Assembly to introduce legislation to at least address life of the mother, the dangers of the pregnancy, et cetera, and so on in a legislative manner?
Oh, I believe there will be. I mean, already Speaker Burns has said that Georgia will pass legislation to protect IVF procedures. So that will be in the same code section of the law where the abortion ban is codified. And so once you have legislation on the floor from that code section, unless they embargo the discussion, it's Katie bar the door.
Yeah.
And so you have to think long term, you have to think strategically. The other thing is the main challenge of the law, which Judge McBurney struck down the law, but then the Georgia Supreme Court quickly reinstated it. The Georgia Supreme Court has not issued a final opinion on the validity of the law.
Right.
And if you go back over Judge McBurney's, I think it was a 34-page opinion, there's a lot of very interesting case law he cited. He gave a strong opinion. Now, perhaps one of the reasons we've had a delay from the Supreme Court is they're trying to find ways to go around the law he cited. So there's still room for this to be discussed in a new General Assembly with the members that are being selected today. And we already know that there are 2 new women who've been elected in primary-only contests. One in Cobb County and one down in the southern suburbs. And so there will be a lot of eyes on Atlanta's northern suburbs and the southern suburbs a little bit, and Bibb County as well. And then some people see Sumter County as a bellwether county for how the state of Georgia will go. And of course, because President Carter hails from Sumter County, people will be watching there as well.
Melita Easter's the executive director of the Georgia Win List joining us. Where are you going to be watching election night tonight? Where are you going to watch the results roll in?
Well, one of my elected women, Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, has an annual election night party that I'll attend.
Nice.
And then I may swing by Manuel's Tavern. I'm not sure, but by about 9 p.m., I will be right in front of my computer screen with the tracking document I've devised for figuring out which women are pulling ahead. Nice. And it'll be an interesting, nail-biting night.
So we may not know tonight, but do you think that women finally cracked that glass ceiling that Hillary Clinton was so evocative of in 2016?
I believe that she will. There's so many hopeful signs in the last week. After that Madison Square Garden horrible, misogynistic, racist, disgusting display of hatred and fear-mongering, I think the Trump campaign has just been circling the drain ever since. And I think that Kamala Harris rose to the occasion in sticking to her closing message of thinking about the future, thinking about the children, thinking about the middle class, believing in the promise of America for everyone and not just billionaire tech pros.
The message has been pretty hopeful, and I have to be honest. I giggled like a schoolgirl watching Donald Trump, waffling up to the garbage truck, unable to open it. And then to see Kamala Harris swoop onto the set of Saturday Night Live, and the line, unlike your opponent, you can open doors, was pitch perfect. I just can't. I can't let that escape. That tableau escape my mind in the closing moments here. We'll see how it all shakes out. All right. Well, listen, it's going to be a long day, so go get a second cup of coffee. I know I'm going to. Thanks for joining the Ron Show today, and good luck tonight for all of your slate of candidates.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure, and we'll talk on the other side of this.
Final few minutes of the Ron Show on Election Day, and I'm happy to have Jeff Graham on from Georgia Equality. Jeff, we've talked off and on, between segments and, just in passing about the tone and tenor of the final weeks of the general election. And the thing that infuriates me the most of all the attack ads is the illegal immigrants in prison, trans surgery, taxpayer dollar. Charlemagne the God has been featured in one of them, and he has sought to cease and desist it because he didn't sign off on it. But let's talk a little bit about that. I think it's been an effective ad for the Donald Trump campaign, unfortunately. What is your assessment?
Well, I think certainly it has drawn an awful lot of attention, and they have spent an extremely large amount of money running those ads in Georgia and in other swing states. But unfortunately, the ads spread so much misinformation and disinformation. The top line of this is that when they refer to medical care for transgender inmates, that is medical care that is required under federal law. Right. That is a policy that was in place during the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. So there is nothing new about this. This is medical care for inmates. We're talking medical care that is essential for individuals who do identify as transgender. The other ad that just really gets to me is the one about sports with a clearly doctored photo. And this is not an issue that voters truly care about, but it is an issue that garners attention, which is why they're pushing it. And the misinformation and disinformation and the effect that it has on our transgender brothers, sisters, right, family members, loved ones, really shows, frankly, the the lengths that some candidates will go to demonize groups of people to win political office. And that's something that I hope we can begin to turn the page on after today's election.
We shall see. Georgia Equality has a slate of endorsed candidates up and down the ticket. And we were talking with Melita Easters at the Georgia Windless, and I'm sure there's probably some cross-pollination there. There is a very real chance that there can be a closing of the gap in the Georgia House and perhaps even, seeing some gains in the Georgia Senate, which could impact legislation or at least stem the tide of legislation that is anti-gay and anti-trans. Are you hopeful?
Yeah, I'm actually, regardless of what happens at the top of the ticket, I do think we're going to have a good night when it comes to state legislative races here in Georgia. And that's really going to have an effect on the LGBT community here in Georgia. I also think that this is something to really watch, and its impact on our ability to actually truly pass an effective Medicaid expansion program here in Georgia. I think that if Democrats make gains, it is because Republicans refuse to expand Medicaid and are losing out on billions of dollars while wasting tens of millions of dollars of state tax funds on the Pathways program that we just have seen has been a failure. It'll be on abortion rights, be on this obsession with pushing bad legislation that hurts transgender kids.
Not only is it election day, but we only have about if I'm doing the math right, about less than 60 days left in the calendar year, and so folks may be pushing some donations out at the last minute. I want you to speak a little bit to what Georgia Equality has done. If you can give me the 60-second answer, what Georgia Equality has done this election cycle that might motivate folks to continue to support Georgia Equality or to make a first-time contribution to Georgia Equality to pitch in.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. We have invested over $1 million in the general election. We've got C3 educational efforts. We've got C4 support for candidates, and we've got PAC independent expenditures that are all running. At this point in time, we know that almost 15% of the people that early voted are in our target universe. So those have been effective in getting people out to vote. In this election, our big project between now and the end of the year into January is frankly hoping to raise around $40,000 to $50,000 so that we can put some ads out, digital ads out on the internet, counteract the negativity around our lives that we've seen over the last few months. We've worked with GLAD, a group called Ground Media. There's ads that are running in some other states. We're hoping to run these here in Georgia. They have proven to be effective into really bringing out the reality that transgender individuals are just trying to live their lives, and that this stigma and misinformation, we really need to counter that in some ways going into the legislative session. And so that's our big goal between now and the end of the year.
All right, last question. Where are you going to be watching results tonight?
I actually have a friend who's celebrating his birthday today, so I'm going to be at a party with him early in the evening, and then we'll more than likely head down to the Hyatt with everybody else later in the evening before heading home, because it's a big work day for me, and I need to be looking at those down ballot races.
I feel you on that. All right, Jeff Graham, Georgia Equality. Best of luck to your slate of candidates, and thank you for joining the Ron Show today.
Thanks, Ron.
I myself haven't figured out what I'm doing election. I was invited to go bowling tonight, but there's no way I can go bowling and kind of keep my eye on no. What am I going to do? I may go to Manuel's myself. No reservations tonight. It's just kind of come in and find a spot and fit in where you sit in, right? So maybe you'll see me with the laptop and some mics at Manuel's. I don't know. Come join the show. Back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. to midnight at Progressive Voices, hopefully with a smile on my face. See you then.